Welcome to Founder Stories. Today with me I have Gaurav Dhillon from SnapLogic. Welcome, Gaurav.
Pleasure to be here, Mike. Thank you for having us.
First, tell me a little bit about SnapLogic.
Sure. So SnapLogic is an cloud integration company. What we do is help enterprises, companies that have 1,000 or more employees, bring in SaaS applications, bring in big data, and connect that with the existing systems and data that they have. And that's our role. And we've got tons and tons of connectors. We call them snaps, about 150 snaps to do all sorts of things, from Hadoop to Twitter to Salesforce to SAP and so on. And that's our role in life, making it all work together.
Moving data around.
Moving information around, breaking down the silos.
And how big is the company?
We're at 84 people today.
Okay, 84. Now, prior to SnapLogic,
yes,
20 years ago, you were the founder of Informatica.
That's correct.
And
co-founder.
Co-founder. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that. I mean, because
sure.
To have a serial entrepreneur and a company who's still around 20 years later is awesome.
That's right. Well, thank you. I feel very fortunate. We certainly, think timing is very important. We all work hard in this world, but, timing is important, and having good values is important. Boy, so that was fun, but in a different kind of way, right? When you're in your 20s, and we were, you have a lot to learn. You have a lot to learn about life in general. You have a lot to learn about, the great unknown of wetware. We know hardware and software, but we don't know about wetware yet. So you learn about organizational dynamics, how companies work. You learn about how to build a global business. These are all things you have to learn on the job while you're growing the company 100% a year, doubling every year. So it was a ride. It was an enormous ride. Doing the IPO was so much fun. This is when digital cameras were so slow, I couldn't take a picture of the ticker in Times Square. Like, I've got to get me. I should have taken it.
Sorry.
It just dates it, right? Like, you couldn't, by the time you got the camera done, the ticker would go by, like, duh! So it was a great fun ride. And the people you work with, the team, the gang, some of whom are still there, it's just awesome getting to know them. You sort of grow up with them, grow up together.
Now, one of the things I have to ask, 10 years ago when I was starting composite software, there weren't forums like Founder Stories.
There weren't.
So, like what I did, we'd pull together a group of folks and we'd play poker once a month just to share stories and to help each other for boards and things like that. 20 years ago, what did you find? Like, how did you learn?
Well, there were some books. There were probably 2 books, I think, that I could find. One was by the guy who was an early DECVAX guy, and there's John Nesheim had a very good book on engineering a startup. In fact, I was showing it to somebody the other day, like, we thought you knew this. look at the date. The inscription is from 1991, right? Like, okay, so you should have that book. But really what you had to do is talk to other people going through the same journey. And what we set up is a group of 5 founder entrepreneurs, founder CEOs, and we would have a dinner every 4 to 6 weeks somewhere in the world and take turns paying. But we never held back on the challenges and on the successes of our businesses. And, sharing what recruiter's working, what's not, how to do rounds of financing, how to handle your board. Corporate governance is very tricky, particularly if you're a founder, because you're not a professional CEO. Chances are you're younger, you're hopefully got a lot of energy, you have a lot to learn, but there's an element of how do you go from being an owner to being a steward of the company when you have other stakeholders and so on. And those subtleties, I think, only come from talking to other people going through the same thing. And, it was a fantastic set of guys, and we had about 2 IPOs. We had actually 2 IPOs out of the 5. Yeah, it was very good group, very good group.
So you raised an interesting topic around boards. And,
yes.
As someone who's founded a company that went public and now you have started a new company, what kind of guidance and counsel can you give our watchers advice in terms of board creation and board management?
Yeah, I think it's about the right chemistry. It's really no different than picking the right co-founder. Because in a sense, in a young startup, your board is your co-founder. Right? So it's about finding durable partnerships. And, this may come as a big, a big set of bad news to modern fundraisers who seem to raise enormous amounts of capital at, nosebleed valuations. But I got to tell you, pick the people over the valuation. Imagine that things don't go perfectly. Just imagine that you hit an air pocket. What happens then? And when you ask yourself the question, you know who is the right choice for you as a partner on this journey. And I'm a believer in picking people over valuations. And I've been very fortunate to have made some good choices the first time around, second time around, and also very fortunate that those people were able to believe in us and make some things go. But you have to look at that and understand. I think it's also, kind of important to pick a group with whom you can be honest about your challenges. I find, particularly after Informatica, when I started joining pro bono boards, the board meetings tend to be rah-rah events. And that's okay. I guess some element of keeping the investors happy has to go on. But being honest about the challenges and the mistakes is vital. And for me, what is really, really a showstopper is if the management team doesn't interact with the board. If it's just the CEO talking to the board, that's not a board meeting. To my mind, that's not a board meeting. So anyway, I got lots of thoughts on this, but
No, it's great advice.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So as you transition out and you went and started SnapLogic, I mean, the obvious question is like, what did you do different, or like, how did you? What kind of things greatly influenced how you structured?
So I think in just studying how people do things, and I think when you're a founding CEO, and if you have a chance to build a company over the long haul, I was there at Informatica for 12 years. We took it from a garage stage, the co-founder and I, to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, from private to public, US to global, and so on. So in doing those journeys, your mistakes find you. There's no place to hide. Truly, the buck stops here, right? That mistake you made is going to find you. You can't, and there's no one else to blame, right? It's you. So I think the key thing was to take some time off and have your learnings catch up with you first. And those learnings take time to assimilate. We don't realize that. You're growing so quickly, you're building the business, you make some mistakes, you get most things right, some things wrong. And if you're mostly good, that's a great startup week. On Friday, if I can say it was mostly good this week, that was a great week. But those learnings take time to assimilate with us. That time in the saddle and the fact recognition, the pattern recognition sort of comes from a period of time. So I think my recognition pattern from the time off after Informatica was, look, we were successful, and many companies, some of the work that you did at Composite, some of my peers at Business Objects and MicroStrategy and so on, were successful from a timing of a computing era. When you're doing out of many one, like the motto of our country, right? When you have businesses that combine from many one, it's very important that there be a change in the environment. And as a result, a new set of technologies is required to combine that. So, and that was to my mind the most important lesson. Look, I've seen far better men and women than I struggle with far better management teams than I. And I finally said, is it timing? Is it picking the transitions? And I really think that the market timing for our kinds of businesses is vital. We could not have done what we did if we started 5 years earlier or 5 years later. And people did try and didn't work out. And I think that is also true of SnapLogic. So our thoughts and what really brought this to mind was I got on a bunch of pro bono boards. I'm at a board meeting somewhere, trying to help out these two young entrepreneurs who started their company in a garage in Tel Aviv, and all kinds of days for that. And I'm sitting and understanding how the web and people are going to the websites, and I'm like, people are going to go from applications to websites in a big way. Like the concept of having an application will date you. Did you go to college? Did you graduate college in the last century or in this century? Because today, when you think of somebody using Workday and you say, hey, how's that HR app going? They look at you blankly. It's not an HR app, it's an HR website. So I think that movement towards websites made me think that we're going through a massive shift. We're going to not only have SaaS, which is you rent somebody else's website. Salesforce is a CRM in the sky. It's a CRM website. Workday is an HR website. And you're also going to build your own websites, what you might be doing to track vacation balances. But the accumulated sum of that was, it was so clear that this new style of computing is going to be most of the computing at the end of this decade. So clear. And I don't know, maybe because we went from the mainframe to client server in the 90s, and it just seems to me an echo of the past. Maybe we're hopeful, certainly it was brave at the time that we decided to do it. And whether we were foolish or smart, time will tell. But it was a bet on the timing of a transition, a giant transition from sort of one style of computing to the other. And that's absolutely critical, I think.
And it seems like we're on that next wave.
It does. It's a little, the derivative businesses, as you and I have both done, sort of the from many one, whether it's analytics or security or integration that combine these things, they are dependent variable on the primary variable. Right? The primary variable is a change in your core apps. You start using Salesforce instead of using Siebel. You start using Workday instead of using PeopleSoft. And those sorts of things start to happen. In marketing, I think it's already happened, because there was really not that many, or maybe one marketing automation app. And now there's so many choices for marketeers because marketing is going online. So as this revolution waves through, the derivatives get swept up in it. And it's an exciting moment in time. It's a little sweaty there for a bit, but it's good now.
One of the things that comes to mind as you're answering the question is, I mean, you spent, more than a decade selling traditional software.
Yep.
Right? Feet on the ground, flying across the country, flying across the world, to sell licenses.
Sadly,
right?
a lot of miles.
And there's like a whole, generation of sales folks trained in that mindset.
It's true.
Now you start a company where that is not, the sales model. Or maybe it is, but I'd love to hear about how you see that, because one of the challenges that once in a while I see startups do is, they have a cloud-based delivery model or a SaaS delivery model, but they have a hard time finding people from let's say if they've learned sales in the old model, how do you make that transition?
Yeah. So, I think there's two elements to it. One is product strategy, right? If you have a product of a certain type, then you can sell it a certain way. If your product is very heavy footprint, if it requires, as we used to call them in the old days, 8-legged sales calls, like 4 grown men and women have to carry this in and plonk, put it down and so on. There's only one way to sell it, which is through a direct strategic sales model. But if you have a product that has a freemium element to it that can be lightly touched and lightly put into place, then other alternatives open up to you. Also, we didn't have the web in the 90s, right? Why could Mark and Nushin have done this all in grade school? Why did it have to wait till high school, right? We didn't have the web in the 90s. And the web, I think, informs how we use and consume information, obviously. But most importantly, it lets you consume product in a different way, right? So now, but you also have to, within that, look at your market space. Right. So we actually looked at the various market spaces and things that people were doing, and we thought, maybe we'll try more of a, easy access kind of model, more of a mid-market kind of play. And I got to tell you, that was a mistake for us. And about the time I'm trying this, I'm looking at, Salesforce's economics. They do about a third, small, medium, large companies and so on. I'm thinking to myself, gosh, what's up here? And I, whether you meet someone at a cocktail party, I think it was Anil Bushri at a cocktail party saying, Dave and I looked at the market, we decided enterprise all the way. And whether it's your own numbers, you're like, gosh, that's not so great. But, we thought that would work, but it didn't. And for us, the model is a enterprise Salesforce model again, even though it is modern technology.
Interesting.
It is exactly sort of the motion that you see from a ServiceNow or Workday. It is that sort of selling motion, because those are the variables that are driving the consumption of our technology. Right? As somebody buys Salesforce in the enterprise,
and starts this kind of catalyst reaction.
That's the seed catalyst. That is the seed catalyst for a combination technology change. And so we have to go through that. So I've dusted off my my old skills, and here we are.
That's fantastic. Well, Gaurav, thank you so much for coming on the Founder Stories today.
Pleasure.
And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.